This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the February 10th edition of the DRF Players Podcast, show 211. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you, not from as promised in the little house on the east side in Saratoga, but back in the Brooklyn bunker. I'm feeling well, or well enough today, but little Perrin down with the flu, and that has scuttled the Saratoga travel plans, which is a little disappointing, but she will be better soon, and we will be up there another weekend, and it'll be an interesting situation. Susan away this weekend, daddy daycare, caring for sick child while betting horses. It'll be one for the memoir, I think. But so that laugh you hear comes from one of the two members of the usual crew joining us here today. That is from the DRF offices in New York, Mike Hogan. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm back in the office today after a snow day yesterday.
Yes. It was a little intense. I don't know how it was out by you, Mike, but I got plenty of shoveling in, and we definitely had whiteout conditions. No aqueduct yesterday, of course, but everything getting back to normal today. Do you have any snow day stories?
No, not really. We just stayed inside. It was so brutal out, and so windy, and it was not the kind of day you want to be out building a snowman or anything like that. We just ran around in the big basement and stayed in the pajamas all day.
That's not so bad. A man who's frequently known for appearing in his pajamas, even in public, or at least that's the comment on some of his outfits. We have from Planet Texas, Jonathon Kinchen. JK, how are you today?
Good. Yeah. Supposedly or apparently my shoe selection for the early mornings at the NHC were something that needed to be discussed. I wore the some house shoes down because I usually go down around 4:30 or 5 in the morning. I do my work, eat breakfast, then I go upstairs at about 8 or 9, shower before the race is coming, and then come back down with a crazy shirt and some crazy shoes. But apparently the house shoes were a point of discussion.
I was among those talking about the oddity of seeing Jonathon Kinchen in Treasure Island slippers as opposed to the hip shoes he's known for sporting there at the NHC. Do you think it had an effect on your performance?
I got to blame something. So, yeah, I'm going to blame it on the shoes.
Oh, all right, gentlemen. Well, we'll be here for about the next hour. We're going to have a very special guest, familiar to most listeners, come in to introduce the 4 public handicapper races that we'll be dealing with about halfway through the show. A few things to discuss before then, including I wanted to do a little bit of follow-up on 2 topics from the last show on Tuesday. We usually don't do this necessarily, revisiting things we just discussed, but in the case of Classic Empire and the Super Bowl, I thought that it was worthy of going back. I don't know, JK, if you had a chance to read that Kevin Ma article I sent around about just basic mathematical strategy and the Super Bowl. Did you have a chance to check that out?
Oddly enough, I started to read it. My business partner and friend Robert Chow was sitting next to me, and he said, "Oh, Pete tweeted that earlier. I read it." And I was like, "Should I read it, or are you going to tell me what happened?" He said, "I'll just tell you what happened." He said, essentially, the Falcons going for it on throwing the ball on second down in that scenario was essentially the same as hitting a 16 when the dealer has 15. I said, "Oh, okay, I got it."
There were other blackjack analogies too. I thought the best. I don't remember what the exact analog to blackjack was, but the idea I found the most interesting. You had blamed Brian for taking the sack in that situation, and I thought you made a good point. But the idea that if they had simply just slowed it down, and on all the possessions in the second half, let the clock tick down instead of snapping it with 20 seconds left as they did, had let it go down inside 10. That alone would have been enough to ice the game. I thought that was fascinating. So I think when it comes to analyzing the results of Super Bowl 51, I think the coaching staff and Ryan have to shoulder the blame equally. That was what I thought after reading that, and just was curious to get your thoughts if you'd had a chance to check that piece out.
I'll chime in.
No, yeah. Well, and before Mike does, just real quick. I mean, they did. Hindsight's 20/20, right? I mean, a lot can be said.
But what's the upside? It's like, the thing about not letting the clock run down, it's not hindsight 2020. It's just look at the basic math strategy of where you are when you're up 28-3. Like, there's no defense for snapping the ball with that much time left on the clock. That's my point.
Fair. That's fair. A lot of times, yeah, that's fair. I can't argue that. What I was going to argue is about the throwing the ball situation, which can be related to this Super Bowl. It can also be related to the last Super Bowl the Patriots won when they were playing the Seahawks. As coaches, and you can even relate this to horseplay. Okay, they watch film, they do study, they understand what's happening, and so when they do something based on that, I mean, say New England's loading the box with 11 guys in the box. Well, they're going to throw the football in that situation rather than running into a wall. I don't think that's exactly what was happening, but just to give you an example, the same can be said in the Super Bowl 3 years ago when they threw the interception. When the Seahawks threw the interception, the Patriots could be blitzing 97% of the time in that scenario, and they were just doing what they thought they should do. The same can be said when you tell your friends that you like the 7-horse, but the 7-horse stumbles at the start and then you look like an idiot. It's the same situation. I think it can be comparable at least. And so I try not to pass judgment. Now, what you're saying is true. The clock management is completely different. It's not really X's and O's, and that's not really excusable.
All right. Mike, you had a comment on the Super Bowl as well?
Yeah, as somebody who has said on the podcast that I don't watch football, I take this with a grain of salt, but my understanding is they went with the strategy that got them there. So I don't fault them for all of a sudden not changing from a running team or from a passing team to a running team. That's fine. Do that. Whatever. Go with what brought you there, because if he doesn't get sacked and if they don't get picked off or whatever ended up happening, then we're not even having this discussion. But I will say that clock management, there's absolutely no excuse for. And that is where, as you said, there is no upside to snapping the ball with 20 seconds left when you can run it down to 5.
When you're up 28-3 in the third quarter.
Right.
You don't need, like, even if they needed more points at that point, you could argue, well, this is the rhythm, this is what they practice, et cetera, et cetera. But at that point, kill the game. And
here's where I'll take it to the horse racing analogy. If you are up in a big way in a contest, okay, and you're a certain type of handicapper, you're a trip handicapper or whatever, don't all of a sudden change and become a pace handicapper, or don't change your game, because what got you there is still what got you there. Stay true to your game. But that said, don't give up whatever advantage you've earned by getting such a big lead. Otherwise, you're just allowing the other team back in the game.
Well, and maybe the way to look at it is it's the last race of a contest, right? And you're up by $18. To me, what the Falcons essentially did in that situation is play a 3-1 shot who couldn't have hurt them anyway. Like, it's doing something that just doesn't strategically make sense given the particulars. If you're up 18 in a contest, you own every horse 5-1 or we're talking about the last race now. 5-1 or under, you own them. They win, you win. You're good. And there's no reason to play them. I think that's a racing analogy that popped in my head.
Fair.
The last little point, and this is not to be to talk negative about the Atlanta Falcons head coach. His name's slipping me, but
Quinn.
Good handicapper, by the way.
At a completely different level. Just a real quick background. When I was coaching, I coached wide receivers on Friday nights, which was the big show. But then on Thursday nights with the junior varsity, I called the plays. When you're and I kind of acted as the head coach. When you're calling the plays offensively, having that adjustment of having to try to now make decisions as a head coach is tough. And I'm not trying to pick on him, but he was a defensive coach for a really long time. And then having to take into account time management at the end of the biggest game of your career on what the offense was doing is a very, very tough adjustment, and a lesson that he probably just learned and probably will never forget and won't make that mistake again. But there's a lot to be said about that as a kind of a new head coach, kind of missing some of the time management things when you were used to being a coordinator for so long.
That's a really good point and very interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I think in general he's terrific, the work he did with the Seattle defense, obviously, and what he showed this year. And like you said, even people who are really good at their jobs can make terrible mistakes in certain situations with implications, and probably the last thing things are going so well, it's the last thing you're thinking about. But it's interesting to then go back and look at how the strategy changes and what the implications can be for something seemingly less important like clock management. Last thing on this, I spent too much on it already, but I'm just interested, JK, to see what you know about this. Are there any teams that have clock management specialists to sort of help with these sort of decisions that are sort of out of the realm of what a coordinator or a head coach needs to do for most of their job 90% of the time?
No, I don't think there's anyone that has a specific guy that's his role, that's his job. Now, it is something that is a role. There could be an offensive guy in the booth that is responsible for keeping track of timeouts. There's a chart that circulates around the coaching world. It's different at every level because of the rules. There's a chart that says I can run the clock out with 2 minutes and 28 seconds if they have one timeout. If they have two timeouts, then there needs to be a minute and 28 seconds. There's a legit chart that has that. But I think that's really the job of the head coach. And that's the biggest adjustment. Sometimes what you see with these, especially with offensive-minded coaches that turn into head coaches, that sometimes is a disconnect. Jason Garrett probably had a little bit of that adjustment going from being a coordinator for so long to then becoming the head coach. Chip Kelly probably ran into some situations like that. Defensive coaches typically don't make the mistake because they care about the clock. They want to get off the field. Belichick's been doing it long enough that he lets his defensive coordinator coach the defense, his offensive coordinator coach the offense, and he manages the game. And that's what he's supposed to do, and why you wouldn't see him make a mistake like that, in my opinion.
All right, that makes a lot of sense, and I think we've spent enough time on that. But it's just interesting strategy, and I think it has enough strategic implications to relate to horse racing. Plus, with the exception of Mike, I think most people listening to this show, participating in the show, at least watched the game. So I don't feel so bad going down the rabbit hole for a few minutes at the beginning of the show. The other note I wanted to follow up with from Monday was to talk about Classic Empire. There's been some news about him since the last show. All of it I find a little confusing, not least of which the quote from trainer Mark Casse. There was something about how surprised he was about the horse behaving badly because he's always so well behaved, or something to that effect. And I just thought to myself, well, yeah, except for that time he wheeled and dumped the rider coming out of the hopeful. It kind of was like the horse racing version of, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, what did you think of the play? And it just left me a little confused. I was wondering if either of you guys could explain it to me.
Here's my look. I get it. It seems a little contradictory, but here's my one slight defense. When my kid acts like a complete a-hole when we're out at dinner, and I say, "Hey, he doesn't normally do this," like, you're getting that one little snapshot of him being that way at dinner, but I literally with him all the time, he never acts that way. So the point could be is that, yeah, Classic Empire has had that really kind of public bad behavior situation where he wheeled at Saratoga, but he could be a really well-behaved, intelligent, smart horse every other moment of his life. It just so happened that, as the public, we're catching the two bad moments. That's my basic attempt at defending him, but it seems like a little bit of a silly comment.
The original thought was that maybe it was something about Gulfstream. Subsequently, they've discovered that there was an abscess, and are now talking about maybe staying in Florida or running in at Santa Anita. I have to say, all the uncertainty around the horse, just it's pushing me to the negative. And I'm not saying that a horse with that kind of talent would ever be like what I'm in a hurry to bet against if the price is right. But I will say this: if this horse comes back as the favorite, I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could support him. What are you thinking about Classic Empire going forward, Mike?
Too hard to trust. I can't trust him at a short price. I mean, look, I know he has talent. I've seen it. It's clear. And if they're able to get his head on straight, because I don't believe for a second that this was the first time that he's ever acted up or had issues, because we heard that, we saw it at Saratoga. They were experimenting with blinkers. There were even some reports that he didn't want to work in the morning. I mean, this is a horse that has talent, but clearly has some head case issues. So, if they get it all on right and he runs a good race again, even still, I don't know how easy he is to trust as he's the current co-favorite in the Derby futures wagers. I can't trust him.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, the Cassie operation obviously does a fantastic job. We've seen the way the campaigned horses like Tepin over the last few years and been able to recover from setbacks and have horses come back and be better than ever. So I'm not saying it's impossible, just saying as a bettor, it's something to be aware of. There seems like there's something in particular about this horse that's just tricky. And if the Cassies are able to figure out what it is and get this horse right, it would go down, I think, just as a tremendous training job and a testament to their hard work and everything that they put in. So it's a story we'll be continuing to follow here on the podcast. Another story we're going to be following, there was sort of a cryptic announcement from Daily Racing Form that I've been hearing a lot about. It's creating some buzz, I guess, which was the idea about this horse player tour. Mike, do you have the email in front of you or handy to tell people what it says?
You mean the one I forwarded you this morning, Pete?
Oh, I didn't know you forwarded it to me. I did. Oh, here it is. I've got it here myself.
Yeah, no, I've got it. I'm just teasing because you replied and said, "Yeah, we'll talk about it on the podcast."
I've been digging for other info, and plus I didn't want to just filibuster here for the next 10 minutes. I figured we'll let somebody else talk. Tell us about the email, and then I'll offer my 2 cents on it.
Well, I'll read it. Many of you got it. It says, after 17 years of building tournaments, DRF has developed a new type of tour that will give players exactly what they want: big prizes, more chances to win, flexible betting options, special perks, and more. You can go and sign up to get emailed as soon as there's more announced on it. Go to drf.com/tour and enter your email address, and you'll be on the list as soon as it becomes more official. You will be the first to hear.
And what I was going to say to everyone who's asking me for more information, I actually went ahead and signed up for that email, so I'll know when you know. This is some high-level, behind-the-scenes stuff going on, well above the pay grade of your lowly tournament editor here. And, I'm excited to see what comes of it. I think there's some potential for more of what I'd call a true tour in terms of like the PGA Tour, going around to different venues and competing for prizes and Player of the Year honors and things like that. So I'm very interested to see what happens. And the one thing I can confirm at this point is a bunch of new partners for DRF in terms of running qualifiers. Now, I'm not saying there's necessarily a connection between them and this tour that's being discussed. I think that's TBD, but it's great to know that in the short term now, in addition to the 3 new partners announced last week, where it was Horse Player World Series and the win in Del Mar, DRF now going to be running qualifiers for Keeneland's Grade 1 Gamble, Monmouth's Pick Your Prize in June, and a third one as well. JK, help me out. I'm spacing.
Did you say Horse Player World Series?
We got Horse Player World Series. We got the win, and we got
Keeneland, Santa Anita, the UBC, the Ultimate Betting Challenge.
I missed one of the biggest ones, the UBC, the joint contest between Santa Anita and Gulfstream. That's going to be happening pretty soon, actually. I believe that's March 11th. So of all the contests we're promoting, I think that's the one that's coming up first. So now every day from Wednesday through Sunday, you'll have a chance to go to DRF tournaments and buy into these events for small money and play in feeders anyway, not to buy into the events, but start your journey to the events in feeders for small money, credit builders, matchup contests. And then on the weekends, different contests will be highlighted different weekends. And so far from what I've seen, the response has been good. JK, are you getting involved in this at all?
Absolutely. I have my sights set on March 11th.
At the handicapping.
I'm ready to rock and. Oh, I thought my man Confidential Charlie was chiming in.
He was. He
told me he's going to try to qualify as well.
Yeah. He's ready to play. Ready to play.
Yeah, he said he's going to qualify. So actually, him and I are thinking about sharing a room together. So.
I can't wait for that.
Be careful. The cigar smoke is gonna knock you right out. I would think twice. Yes, those of you listening, Mike has kind of let the cat out of the proverbial bag, or let the Charlie out of the proverbial bag here. Usually it's backed by popular demand. In this case, a little bit later in the show, in strict violation of popular demand, we will be hearing a little bit from Confidential Charlie, just so you know. But anyway, JK going to be very involved in the site. What do you, of these tournaments, which one, like, tell me your plan right now. What are you, which of these contests do you have circled on your calendar to target as of this moment?
I'm going to the UBC no matter what. So I'm going to play in that no matter what from Santa Anita. And then I'm going to play at Keeneland no matter what. So I'm going to spend, like we've talked about before, I'm going to kind of employ my strategy of playing playing feeders during the week and playing head-to-heads for the exact same dollar amount. And the whole point is that I'm not always going to be better than 27 other people, but there's a good chance I can be better than one other person. And if I can just kind of break even until I qualify for the Saturday events, then that's kind of a plus for me. So I'm going to do that and try to qualify for both of those, and try not to lose too much money in the process of doing that, and hopefully get a free roll. So typically when I've targeted something I want to qualify for, typically if I apply myself enough, I can usually get lucky enough on one day to get it done. So I'm going to keep trying to do that. Those two for sure. Horse Player World Series is I would like to go scenario, but those two for sure. And I typically work in order, like the UBC has my full attention because it's the first one, and so I'm going to focus on that. And then I'll spend the second half of March getting ready, trying to get qualified for the Keeneland tournament. But definitely those two for sure. And then the wind's so far away. Not trying to discourage anyone from playing, but if you're planning on it, if you're bankroll limited and you want to go to the UBC or Keeneland, then focus your time and energy on that at the moment. Unless you just love something for the day, then play in all of them, which I do it from time to time. If I love a horse, if I have a bet back that's 10-1, I'm playing in every tournament that I can get my hands on because I want to take advantage of that opinion.
That's a great idea, and something that you can use the DRF Horse Watch email to help you out with for some players who aren't perusing every track every day like JK is. You can have certain horses that you get that email when they come back in, and then okay, today's the day I'm going to load up. Just scrolling through tournaments.drf.com right now, I really like the variety of price points we're seeing. I don't know if you've noticed, we've got even more of a spread than we used to there. I mean, on a given day, it seems like we go from as little as an $8 winner-take-all credit builder all the way up, even on a weekday, to being able to play in a matchup contest for 110 where you can win 200 in credit. It's pretty cool. It gives players a lot of flexibility. Some of these winner-take-alls you can get in for as little as $5. If you've been thinking about getting involved in tournaments, this is just a great time to go to the DRF tournament site and get yourself started. A lot of different ways you can go, no matter what your goals are in tournament playing. So I highly recommend that folks check that out. Now, JK, I understand in a few minutes we're going to hear a little bit of a change in your background noise. You've got some fun plans, it sounds like, for this afternoon. You're out there. I said you were in Texas, but I lied. The jet took you to Lexington this morning. Isn't that right?
Last night, but yeah, I'm in Lexington. Went and hung out with our friend Mike Maloney yesterday, which was always a blast. Today I'm going to hang out with someone who occasionally listens to the podcast, a guy that works at Coolmore that we were lucky enough to meet last spring, Scott Calder, and check out some stallions and try to learn something about the breeding side of this thing. Not that I'm ever, that I need to buy a $300,000 yearling or anything like that, but just an interesting part of it while I'm here. It's so that'll be fun. So yeah, at some point I'm going to be Ubering, so the background noise is going to change a little bit. So don't be thrown off by that.
It's not for once. It's not me or Mike causing the problem. We'll just put the blame squarely on JK for that one. But let's talk about your interest in the breeding industry, because even if you're not involved in horse racing per se, wouldn't you say that being at least conscious of the breeding side of the business can help you as a horse player, as a handicapper?
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. What's funny is I didn't know. Well, I mean, I would have figured it out, but I didn't know how big Uncle Mo was, and until I saw him. And now that I know that, when I look at his horses, I view them just completely different. When there's one that's stretching out, things like that, and so, and then just some of the really cool aspects of I think breeding guys are impressed by some of the crazy racing knowledge that we have of remembering who ran second and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. Well, I think it's great to hear them talk about, the pedigrees and the third dam and this one has, this distance in the pedigree and all that good stuff. So it's always interesting. It's just another piece of the puzzle. It's another tool for the toolbox for a handicapper, just to kind of understand as many aspects of the game as you possibly can to identify potential spots where you can make some money.
We saw that at the NHC this year with Steve Wilson Jr., who's got as good a knowledge of the breeding industry as anybody in the contest game, maybe outside of his dad. And, of course, all the years Steve Sr. spent on the breeding side of the business, and being able to find, I think mostly it's horses doing things for the first time, it's maidens, it's turf races, but the understanding of pedigree. There was actually a very odd conversation about this on Twitter. I don't remember the specifics recently, but somebody was talking about, what can you learn from a pedigree that you can't learn from watching a horse? Well, to me, I think there's a whole heck of a lot when it comes to understanding things about distances and an affinity for grass, because, you can see a turf horse's stride running on dirt, but if their hoof isn't sort of genetically shaped the right way to get the best effect, you might be able to say, oh yeah, well, that's probably going to be a turf horse. The horse is going to probably be better on turf, but it's not the same as being able to pull up a pedigree and look at the dam and the second dam and look at these families and see which runners have it literally in their blood to do that. And you'll see, just look at some of the horses Steve Wilson Jr. came up with at this year's NHC. There were some crazy long shots that were a direct result of his knowledge of breeding. He sits with that very sharp table with the Shermans and Mitch Schumann, and he was coming up with some selections that these other sharp handicappers were like, not sure where you're going with this one, and the majority of them won. And I think that just speaks to how powerful a knowledge of the breeding side of the business could be. Mike, you're the only one of the three of us who's actually spent any time, technically inside the breeding business as somebody who's bred horses in your life. Is there any particular knowledge that you accrued from your time on the breeding side that's helped you as a horse player?
I don't know about specific knowledge that I learned on the breeding side so much as I just pay more attention to it now. And you're right. You'll see these horses that maybe are ready enough to race at 2 in sprints, but, even if they run 4, 5, 6, 7 times, you might see that their breeding says that they're going to be better going longer, that they're going to be better the more they mature, that all of their siblings, that their dam, that their second dam maybe didn't win their first few races, but they got good later. That's the kind of stuff that even if you regularly watch races, even if you're a very astute trip handicapper, even if you're very good at judging horse flesh, you can still learn a lot by a horse's pedigree, even when they've run 5, 6, 7 times before.
All right. Before we get to the racing, before we get to Confidential Charlie, 2 quick things. One sad and one more in the tales from the track realm. But I haven't even read the full stories yet, Mike, so I'm going to ask you to fill in on this. But I just did see the news that Royal Delta has died. She was a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
What was the situation there?
She died foaling a Galileo filly. The filly survived, but Royal Delta unfortunately did not. So yeah, it's the only filly, I think it's the only foal that she produced. She didn't breed 1 year. She aborted a foal another year, and then this is the only one that's resulted in a live foal. But unfortunately, we lost Royal Delta.
Well, she was just such a great horse, such a pleasure to watch on the track from her debut through her Alabama win, I remember, a personal ensign win, and, of course, a 2-time Ladies Classic winner. JK, I recall you being a fan of Royal Delta.
I was, yeah. I tweeted one of my favorite races of hers, which was the distaff, what they called the Ladies Classic at Churchill when she won. And then I had to decide between that one and the Breeders' Cup she won at Santa Anita, where she wired the field. She was just a cool horse. She was just a powerful horse, and that's kind of was the thing that really stuck out about her to me. And I just, she's one of those ones that that you just fall in love with over time, and it's sad to see him go. So hopefully it's great news that the Galileo foal survived, and hopefully she'll make Mom proud.
Keep those bloodlines going. The next one, I didn't even tell you guys I was going to do this, but it's a little tale from the track. It's a guest tale from the track. Just an email. I thought it was with a message that people can stand to be reminded of, and we always encourage audience participation. If you've got questions, you can hit us up on Twitter. You can also always email us at podcast@drf.com. This one comes from a guy named Daniel Helder. Good morning, Peter. I'm new to the sport, and my recent missed opportunity has been eating at me the last few days. I wanted to share my experience in the hope it could be passed along to fellow horse players as a reminder of what should be a basic fundamental whenever you're playing a long shot. I think from there I already knew where the story was going, but I thought it was a particularly good illustration of it. Since witnessing Witt's Town's horrendous trip at Delta Downs a couple of months ago and still finishing strong to gain second, I've had my eyes on her. I was eager to bet her in her next outing. I checked the entries and was ready to bet a fair amount on the young filly. Unfortunately, all but 3 other horses scratched from their next appearance, making her a short price. Either way, she performed and went on to win by multiple lengths. Fast forward to the next start with Allowance Company, and Wittstown is now a long shot as I'd hoped. I wagered my max amount, with half on a win ticket and the rest sprinkled around in multi-race wagers. Wittstown was outmatched and finished far behind. I decided to follow for one more race to see what might be, which leads me to this story this past Monday. Wittstown was entered in a 1-mile turf race at Sam Houston, her first attempt on the turf. The morning line was set at 15-1, and my interest was piqued again, especially since her late-running style seemed to fit the field so well. I immediately started putting together every multi-race ticket I could think of. One double with 2 favorites in the first leg finished with Wittstown in the second leg. Another double with Wittstown in the first leg and 3 likely winners in the second leg. A pick 3 with Wittstown leading the way, followed by numerous entries to fill the second and third legs. Lastly, a pick 5 with Wittstown in the first and what seemed to be everyone else with a pulse. I added the with a pulse in the 4 remaining legs. As I was checking things between work happenings, I actually do have a job. I noticed as the MTP hit single digits that Wittstown's odds were starting to steadily increase. At the last minute, as the odds settled in at 61-1, I threw a $2 win place bet into the mix, as all I had left in my account at that point was 4 and change. I think you know where this is going. Wittstown came charging late and won easily, and all the other horses on my tickets were no-shows. I'd pegged a 61-1 winner and only left with $166. Both sides of the doubles fell apart. The pick 3 had no chance, and the pick 5 was carryover material for 17 dimes into Tuesday's card. After all that, I think it's worth the reminder that when you have a long shot in mind, make sure you have the bankroll left to play a decent amount on a win ticket when your pick takes an unexpected jump into the 50-1 odds range. Thank you to you, Mike and Jonathan, for your weekly contributions to my new favorite pastime. I'm looking forward to my second trip to the Kentucky Derby this spring, and we'll be listening for all the breakdowns of the equine athletes. Take care, Dan. Well, thank you for that, Dan. Absolutely an important message. And I would go a little bit farther and say, to make sure you have some win money on your key selections, I don't think you have to be at 50-1. To me, any kind of overlay, anytime it's value and it's your best bet of the day and it's a horse you've been waiting on, I think you have to have at least a portion of your investment on the nose. JK, what do you think of Dan's story?
Oh, it's tough. That's not fun. However, I disagree with Dan, and I disagree with you as well, Pete. If you are a guy that plays multi-race bets, that's what you do. It's a little bit of the crush their soul situation. If I love something like that, I'm going to try to maximize that great opinion. Because the truth of the matter is that, yes, right, it would have been nice if you would have had a little bit at 61-1. But if the horse wins at 60-1 or whatever, and you bet 100 to win on him, it's great. You get your 6,000 back, and that's exciting. But if you look after the race is over and you look at all the multi-race scenarios in which how you could have made so much more money because if he was 60-1 in the win pool, he was probably much bigger than that in all the multi pools. And so I think you played it right. You just got unlucky. Maybe you made some mistakes.
You've got to divide your capital. You can do both there. You don't have to. I think.
Well,
same thing.
I mean, I don't think you wanted $2 on the horse, but I have no problem with a majority of your investment being in a majority, like 80 to 90% of your investment being in a situation like that. I don't have a problem.
Here's where I'm going to disagree, Jonathan, and here's where I'm going to say you are a unicorn. Okay, compared to most of our listeners, you are a much bigger better and a much bigger multi-race better than many of. I'm sure we have listeners that are similar to you, but I would say the vast majority of people listening are more like Dan or even myself, where we dabble. If we've got multiple opinions, we can string together, but we don't or shouldn't be thinking multi-race wagers if there's a horse we like in a single race. And that's where I would start. It's, if you've got an opinion in a single race, bet that single race first, and then stretch out from there. And the single race could be that win, place, show on the horse that you like at huge odds. It could be using them in the tries and the exactas and supers like that. But if you've got a strong opinion in a single race, make sure you play that race. That's my advice.
I'm sort of in the middle. I have no problem at all trying to maximize in those other legs. It sounded like Dan had opinions in there, but it just sounds to me like the first time he bet the horse, he did it the right way, and the horse just didn't happen to win. You got to be sensible about the way you divide up your money. You got to give yourself the chance to get paid, like Jonathan's suggesting,
sure,
but not at the expense of the strongest opinion winning and not having it. So I'm a little bit in the middle of you two guys.
And what I'll say this is I think there's a lot of players that aspire to be like you, Jonathan. I mean, and I mean that in the best kind of compliment. They aspire to tell the story about the $60-some-odd thousand pick six that they took down and the $200 cold pick three that they took down. I think that's what a lot of players would love to be able to do, but it's just not how many are comfortable playing, and so I think you have to look at how you're comfortable playing. That for you, that's where you live. So of course you're going to say, look, I want to crush their souls. I want to take this 60 to 1 and turn it into 300 to 1. Not everybody can do that though.
I'm very much looking forward to the DRF Players Podcast, Jonathon Kinchen, Crush Their Souls t-shirt. We've got to get that made. Absolutely got to get that made. I mean, it is an interesting thing, and we got to bring in Charlie here in a second, but I will say that I do think sometimes, JK, that aggressiveness can work against you. Like, you're absolutely okay. Your bet of the day wins, and you don't cash. You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is different. That is definitely.
I mean, I don't want that to happen.
No, of course not. But it's not.
You can live with it.
To me, it would be completely unacceptable.
Yeah, I can live with passing on $100 because I was trying to make 1,000.
Yeah, I want to try to do both. That's how.
Yeah, and it's probably a weakness of mine, to be honest. So I mean, I need to probably do better at it. But that's kind of. I probably should reel it in a bit. But that's kind of where I've lived.
I mean, to some extent, we're talking about hedging. It's just hedging in different ways. I mean,
I don't think it's hedging at all.
I do because, and I'll use this as the example. If Jonathan's saying the vast majority of his opinion is going to be in this pick 5 or pick 6 or whatever it is, this multi-race sequence, he's hedging that he maybe misses on one or two of the legs, but he's hedging that his strongest opinion within that is still going to win. So he's putting win money in. He's saving a portion of his bankroll in order to place it on the head of his strongest opinion. So to some extent, that's a hedge.
We have different definitions of hedge.
Sure.
But we don't have time for it now. We'll come, but it's a good conversation to return to. Just about hedging in general is something that's good to talk about. I don't want to get into a semantic argument though when we only have 20 minutes left and we've got to bring in Confidential Charlie.
Okay, let's start handicapping.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate your coming back on the show. And we will start handicapping now with the 4 PH races for the weekend. What order do you want to do these in, guys?
Let's hit Gulfstream first and then move to Tampa. Tampa's got a fantastic card on Saturday, so we can end with that.
I like it. I did look at the 2 Tampa races. I did not get a chance to look at the Gulfstream races. I had the time allotted, but ended up having to play Doc McStuffins over here, so that didn't work out quite so well. But the 9th at Gulfstream is the Swanee River. Jonathan, you get a chance to look at this one?
I did. It's a pretty tough race. Here's what I did, and this happens, I think, to a lot of handicappers. Is last week I tried to fade Remska, and then I remembered, oh, Chad Brown trains her, and so when I looked at this race, I was trying to get creative in some other areas. I've always thought it was kind of interesting with Puka on the turf, and that last turf race was actually pretty good, and so there's a part of me that wanted to kind of lean in that direction, and I might use there in certain spots, but I really just couldn't get away from the 5. Is it Ulysses World?
I call her Ellis.
LSC,
Okay.
yeah, something like that.
Well, that's where I landed. In the summer, she had a lot of kind of tricky trips. She stumbled against time and motion. She came from last in that race, but then she kind of showed up here and swept by the field. Was running well, was training well leading up to that. I'm not going to let this Chad get away from me at 8-1. I don't think we'll get 8-1. It's Chad. It'll probably come down to 5 or 6, but that's still pretty fair for me. So it's kind of a tricky race. There's a lot of horses in here that I wouldn't toss out, but to lean on something, it's Ulysses World, and then I would also use Puka a little bit underneath and defensively in multi-race bets.
I'm going to ask you this, Jonathan, and I haven't looked. I'm trying to look right now as I ask you this question, but I noticed that she's cross-entered in one of the Tampa races tomorrow that we're not talking about, one of the stakes there. Do you know, have you heard that Chad Brown is entering in this spot instead of that one?
When I see horses cross-entered at a place that's an hour away and a place that's 4 hours away, I always assume that they're going to the one that's 1 hour away. So but I haven't read. I don't know for sure.
Right. Yeah. I haven't heard either. I kind of assumed it might be the other way around since he's also got Goldie Esponi coming off of a long layoff, having last raced in December of 2015, and she's probably the more likely of the two, at least if she's able to get back to her previous form.
Well, here's the thing about that, and this is, and I will make a bold prediction with Cali 37 in here.
Sure,
I would imagine that Goldie Esponi goes up north and not try, because all of her good races come when she walks the dog on the lead.
Yeah, but she's not cross-entered. She's not cross-entered, and your horse is.
Ah, okay, I see what you're saying.
Well, a lot of times when a trader puts 2 horses in a race, I just talked about this with Gary Johnson this week in a piece up on DRF.com right now about his decision to leave the contest world actually and go back to training horses, that what he would do in these spots is, if he's entering 2, he wasn't necessarily talking about grade 3 stakes, he was talking about 5-dime claimers at Thistledown. But his strategy in this situation would be to enter 2, see which one the pace was more suitable for, other qualities of the race, and make his decision based on that. To me, if I'm trying to pick which one of these horses is more likely to win in this field, given the pace and everything else, I'm with JK. I'll take it. Let's see his world at 8-1 over Goldie Esponi. Chad Brown knows how to handicap, so we'll have to see how he decides to play it. I mean, heck, she's been off since December of 15. Maybe a couple more weeks off wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Goldie Esponi at this point. But it'll be interesting to see how he plays it. He's also, of course, been known to just flood the entry box and run both of them, so or more than 2. So we'll have to see how he decides to play it. Mike Hogan, what did you think of this race?
Well, for me, I tried to get cute and I tried to come up with an alternative. But for me, after handicapping it, I kept coming back to the runners from the Marshalls River, which is Sandiva, Seacoast, and Dickinson coming out of that race, and Goldie Esponi, who I think is legitimate. I mean, I trust Chad off the long layoff, and she's fired off of long layoffs before. I don't see her as likely being not ready to run. I just think at a short price, she might be vulnerable to a little bit of pace pressure. And I actually like Seacoast to turn the tables on Sandiva, assuming that that the winner comes out of the Marshalls River. I think those are the best horses in the race. I think she got a little bit, it wasn't a whole lot of trouble, but a little bit of trouble where Sandiva kind of got the first jump. She had to go down to the rail. I think in the second start off the layoff, this is an improving mare for Christophe Clement, and she'll be a good price. I think she'll maybe be able to stalk the pace and get first run on the closers and turn the tables here.
All right, the 10th race is a Grade 1. It's the Gulfstream Park Turf Handicap, 1 1/8 on the grass. Mike, we'll keep it with you.
This is one where I think the winner last year is going to be a big player here. I mean, there's a lot of good horses in here and a lot of ways you can go. And of course, we have Chad Brown with the one of the morning line favorites, Beach Patrol, and Jonathan's favorite horse ever, just about Divisadero, is running, who I think will be, potentially better than he was in his first start, where he went further than the winner, 42 feet further, and now ready in the second start off the layoff. But I think those two are going to be bet so heavily, and I don't think that they have really an edge on the field. I'm willing to give Luke's Alley a shot here. He won this race last year. Granted, it was probably an easier field, but he clearly likes the Gulfstream surface. I think that start in the Fort Lauderdale where he was 7th and he had a lot of trouble, I think that was just kind of setting the stage for this second start. Coming in, did the same thing in the Fort Lauderdale, used that as a prep to win this race last year. He'll be a square price, and I think lightning strikes twice here.
JK, we've got 2 of your old favorites, not only Divisadero, but also Beach Patrol, who you've touted on a number of occasions. So you were sharp enough to get off last time and steal my pick, Annals of Time. But what do you think? Is it going to be one of those two, or can we find a little bit more of a price here? Or did we lose JK in his Uber?
I think we got him muted. JK, you talking?
No, he's not here. He must have fallen off with the Uber. He's coming back on
I'm
the
back.
call.
Oh, he's
I'm
back.
back.
Okay,
He's
good.
back.
Did you hear the question?
Was it about the race?
Are you there, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
I
Yes.
didn't realize that the cell service was so bad out
I
by
can hear him.
Ashford in Lexington, Kentucky.
I can
but
hear him.
apparently,
Yeah.
apparently.
Keep going,
You're
Jonathan.
back?
I can hear
So
you.
did you hear the question?
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear the question, but here's what I'll say is that I'm assuming it had something to do with my love for Divisadero. Am I wrong or right?
Well, it was basically you've bet Divisadero and Beach Patrol many times before. Is it one of them or is it somebody else?
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. So I was actually excited about talking about this race. I still do love Divisadero. I still think he's a top quality horse. I do think he's got a big Grade 1 with his name on it this year, maybe a couple of them. But Beach Patrol for me in this spot. He's going to be forwardly placed on a turf course that enjoys that trip. It's Chad. He's an older horse now. It's going to be his first race down at Gulfstream. I like Beach Patrol a lot, and I'm hoping Divisadero takes a lot of money, and Beach Patrol's price creeps up a little bit because I'm going to be pretty heavy on Beach Patrol.
You'll use Divisadero in the verticals, but more underneath, or you won't touch him at all?
No. I'll use him defensively. You can't. Like I said, I have a blood-laced contract where I signed that I have to bet him when he runs. I mean, I can't toss him, but I just don't think this is the setup for him, and I really, we try not to, especially on this show, we try not to knock, we try not to publicly knock the riders. But I just feel like there's probably a better rider out there that fits this horse a little bit better, but I appreciate Buff Bradley's, consistency and commitment. But I don't like Divisadero at Gulfstream. It's not, there's nothing that's in his favor about that course and about the way that it plays. And so when he gets back to Churchill in the spring, and then this summer when he's running around on the East Coast at Naira, I think he'll do much better.
Just to defend old man River Edgar Prado himself, he did kind of put on a clinic for your boys in California on the turf last fall, if you remember. So he might have a couple more glory days runs in him.
A quick funny little aside about that is I was making fun of him a little bit to our friend Jake Ballas, and Jake pointed out the fact that he's like, hey, don't you have him tattooed on your arm? And I looked at my arm and I was like, oh darn it, I do. I can't believe that.
Oh my goodness, you really should think twice.
And let's not knock Prado. I mean, Prado has actually had a nice last couple years under the radar. He's been profitable in graded stakes. He had some lean years. Yeah, I'll give him that for a few years. But he's come back. I mean, he's ridden some good horses. He's had some chances Run Happy, Divisadero. I mean, even for Graham Motion out there, he's gotten some good mounts and he's come through with them.
All right, fewer than 10 minutes remain on today's episode of the DRF Players Podcast, and we still have 2 races from Tampa Bay Downs. The first is simply the Tampa Bay, a Grade 3 mile and a 16th on the turf. Jonathan, did you have a thought here?
I didn't have a strong opinion here, but here's one thing that I did notice that jumped out at me is that if you look at as many races as us 3 guys do, I'm sure you've noticed all of these horses with the name Conquest are now you see Mark Casse, and then it switches to someone else. I find it extremely interesting that this horse didn't leave Mark Casse's barn, yet it did change ownership. And what that tells me is that Mark and the Casse team told Mr. Barber, look, Conquest is going to do their dispersal. We got to keep this one. He's pretty good. He's won 2 races in a row. Conquest Panthera at 12-1 is one that caught my attention. And one that I'll try to build around. Obviously, Keigan deserves some credit, but I always like it when trainers enter in other horses with good ones. It means that they think that they can compete. And so Conquest Panthera for me is one that's a little bit interesting, but not the strongest opinion in the world. Just one that I would use.
I was going to take a look at number 9 in here, Coco Mon, who I was thinking might be able to get a good trip from the outside. That outside not easy coming out of the chute there at Tampa, but seemed like a horse with some strong numbers who might be a bit of a price, and I thought things maybe could just trip out. Other obvious uses for me are Kasicki and number 6 Catapult, who ought to be on the lead, I think, in a race where I don't see a ton of pace. Mike Hogan, what did you think?
Before I give my opinion, I'm going to mention a couple things about what Jonathan's Conquest Panthera picked. First, I wonder if he's another one that may not run because he doesn't have a rider named, which may just be a non-issue. But often when you see horses entered, especially in stakes races, and they don't get riders, makes me go, I wonder if this is a backup plan.
Does the other Casse not have a rider too, though? I thought I saw the other Casse.
Neither one has a rider.
Yeah. So anyway, that's maybe neither here nor there. I will say that during the podcast, regular listener Joe Fetch, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Joe, tweeted to me and said Steve Bick talked to Chad and Elisia's World will race at Gulfstream. So there you go, Jonathan. But the other thing I'll say about any of these horses that sell at Keeneland as older horses, including any of these Conquest horses, go to any of the websites. DRF doesn't have any horses that sell after age 2, so you're not going to see the sale price for Conquest Panthera. But if you bring up, either go to Keeneland.com, you can look up by horse. You can see Conquest Panthera sold in November for $100,000, and the buyer was Mark Casse. So he did that obviously for Gary Barber. So that's another thing I like to look at. Is this in Conquest Enforcer, of course, is racing this weekend. You can see he sold for over $700,000. It's one of those things I like to look at, especially if you figure there's a strange drop and the horse is now entered for a claiming tag. You can see what they sold for at auction.
Yeah, that just sort of backs up JK's positive thoughts on Conquest
exactly.
Panthera. So
exactly.
What are you thinking here?
Well, the horse that interests me a lot is actually the older half-brother to one that I'm sure we'll talk about next race, and that's number 8, Bondurant, for Ian Wilkes, a homebred for Janice Witham, who is the older half-brother to McCracken. And this is a horse who debuted in his only run on the turf and has gotten good. And finally gets another shot. He actually ran real well in a grade 3 at Churchill. I think this is an improving 4-year-old. He's going to be a good price. He'll get a little bit of a pace to run at, and I think he'll be a player in here. The only other one that I'll mention that I like that I'd be using is number 1, Inspector Lindley, who I think really kind of had no shot trying to rally last out. And if you want to see why it's hard for closers to rally when the turf rails are out at 108 feet at Gulfstream, watch the replay of Inspector Lindley. He was loaded. He just didn't have any room. And that often happens when the rails are out because there's just less room for those closers to rally.
All right, let's go to the Sam Davis at Tampa, the last race we'll talk about back on the Derby trail here. We're going to start this one off with a good stat, bad stat. Jonathan, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. I have an opinion about it. This is an Ian Wilkes stat that Mike came up with for the, what is it called, the Derby Countdown Guide?
Yeah, it's a Derby Preview Countdown Guide. It's available for purchase with the Derby package, and it's also available for free for any DRF Bets members. Just log into DRF Bets, and you can download it from there.
Ian Wilkes, just 45, 5, 12, 6. In other words, 44 starts, 5 wins, 12 seconds, 6 thirds, with a 96-cent ROI on $2 over the past 5 years in dirt routes following a layoff of this type, with 19 of those losses coming at odds 5-1 or lower. Does that stat move you one way or another?
Yeah, no, it moves me. I think it suggests he's not going to have this horse fully cranked, kind of like what we saw. Well, there was more to the story, but kind of what we thought we were going to see last week with Classic Empire. When you have an undefeated horse who's first or second in Kentucky Derby future wagers, the Sam F. Davis is not the target. And so it doesn't feel as if he's going to have this one fully cranked and ready to roll. So it does tell me a little something. But at the same time, on paper, he's the best one, so you got to toss him at your own risk. But no, I think it's a valid stat.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a little interesting. The one thing I did notice, and the one thing I will do a lot of the times with all stats, is look at the sort of in the money percentage, and noticing that if you add the 12 seconds to the 5 wins, you're all of a sudden you're looking at a situation where I'm detecting that some of this was unlucky to have so many seconds and thirds, over 50% on the stat. So it was one that I'd reserve judgment, but just logically, the point about this maybe being a time to take on McCracken did sit with me. And I was going to go back to my old buddy No Dozing and take a little bit of a shot there. It's sort of a little bit of an odd trip last time where the rider, Centeno, who's back today, took a tight hold, took kind of a bad step in the first turn. And I just liked the way the horse finished and had a little bit of interest in maybe trying to connect with No Dozing at a price, though I wouldn't be in a hurry to leave McCracken off too many tickets. Mike, we'll go to you, and then we'll finish up with Jonathan. We just got a couple minutes here, though, so be quick.
I will. The quick thing I'll say about the Ian Wilkes stat is, you're right, Pete, there were a lot of in-the-money finishes, but one ran second, beaten 12 lengths, another ran second, beaten 5 lengths, another ran third, beaten 12 lengths at odds of 1-2. So even though they finished in the money, they weren't necessarily close to winning. So that's another thing. I love to use Formulator.
Formulator to be able to look at all those. Formulator lets you look at all those runners and come up with those kind of analyses. So good stuff. Well, who do you like in the race?
I like Wild Shot. And if you watch that last race, I mean, you look at the last 2 races. He lost to McCracken and Classic Empire. And he was doing the dirty work in both those races before fading. The pace might be a little hot here, but I hope he sits a good trip, second or third. That race last out, he held on very well and was clear of the third-place finisher. If he's able to turn the tables, and if McCracken's not quite ready to fire his best shot, I like Wild Shot in this spot.
JK, who is it?
Well, just to prevent Arnold Delacour from having to get one of those saddles that can ride 2 people with me and you both on, No Dozing. I like No Dozing, and I like the trip. Watch the replay from the Remsen, and you'll like the horse a little bit more than you might have thought. For the sake of conversation, I'm going to use the 7 Taprit a little bit, the other Todd. I think that when you see horses that are getting outside trips at Gulfstream go somewhere else and project to get a little bit of a different ride there, that's something that's always encouraging. And so, Jose comes up for the day to ride the horse, and I think that's one that I would definitely consider using in a tournament setting. No Dozing, McCracken, they're both going to be extremely overbet. Fact finding is going to take some money. I'm pretty sure that Taprit's going to probably go off at the 4th or 5th choice, and that's good enough for me.
I like you saying that, because that means Wild Shot is going to get overlooked. I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, well, he will for me too. I had it 987 as well, Mike. So we'll have to see. You might get a bit of a price there, gentlemen. That is all the time we have for today's show. We hope folks who are listening live will move over to DRF Live to check out the Matt Bernier show. I assume Matt is doing his thing today, his usual Friday deal. I want to thank Jonathon Kinchen. I want to thank Confidential Charlie. I want to thank Mike Hogan. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. We'll be back on Tuesday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.